Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from cardswire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from USA Today's NFL Wire. Recording episode 662. We're gone for a couple of weeks. You know, there hasn't been a lot in the offseason, but I've got my co-host, Seth Cox from AvengerTheBurst.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. And, you know, Seth, it's the last 2 weeks of the offseason program. Last week was the first week of OTAs. This is the second week of OTAs. They've got minicamp next week. The Cardinals chose to go with only 2 weeks of OTAs instead of 3, and then minicamp. And so, which about half the teams in the NFL did this year. They cut their offseason program by about a week.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we're seeing become more of the standard, right? Like these teams as negotiations with you know the collective bargaining go on, it's less on-field work, and you know, you get the back in my day people, right? Like, but the reality is that the league and the players are at a point now where they're doing so much all off season. Like, you can tell the guys that come in and aren't in shape, right? Like, it's not like it used to be where these guys were smoking and drinking all off season, and then they come back in and they needed training camp to get into shape to play, 16 games and do all that. You don't see that much anymore. Now, it still happens every once in a while. Let's not be naive, but it's much further and farther between than it was previously, and so that's kind of where this is all going, because now it's just based off like, hey, let's get these guys out, let's make sure that they are working out, that they are getting in a little bit of shape, that when they come into July, they've done nothing for the last X amount of months, and that's where these guys live now, and like I said, it's a delicate balance, but it's one that seems to be working for most of the NFL. And
what was interesting is the fact that they didn't make any change. Remember, it was about this time last year when there was a report that there was discussion about completely changing the offseason program, the calendar, where basically players would have on, because as it is right now, you start the offseason program with workouts, and there's a ramp up in April, and they were considering, or at least the NFLPA was going to try and negotiate where that spring work is eliminated, and then you basically push that whole offseason program to the weeks leading up to training camp, so you don't end up having April to June and then 6 weeks off and then have to ramp up again. I see benefits to both sides, but they ended up changing nothing. Well,
and that's all it is, right? There are some good things, or things that they should be doing that they're not, but the reality becomes, and I look at the trickle down into college and then high school and how everything's changed. I mean, hell, high school, we start 4 days a week, and they call it they use the same kind of flowery wording, right? They have football skills clinic or something of that nature. That starts in February, and it goes through the end of May, and then and then you start summer camp, right? And then summer camp's 3 to 4 nights a week, with weights 4 days a week in the morning. Like, it's absurd. And that's what the NFL has like kind of set forth of like, hey, this is what's needed to be successful. And so now it's, like I said, trickling down into the lower levels. And so maybe correcting that back just a little bit, it will be a good thing. But I can tell you, like, from a personal standpoint, like having like 4 nights a week over in the summer to go into 6 days a week for during the season, you're like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's crazy. But the Cardinals had one piece in this show. We've got some OTA stuff we're going to talk about. There's not much to talk about because we don't get to see what's at practice. Not much is reportable. There was one piece of news, and I don't have that. Yeah, I still need to tell you guys about that, but there is a change in the coverage, at least from CardsWire, that the CardsWire site no longer has media access. So I don't get the little even insight. So we have to steal things from our buddies. And the team, frankly, doesn't. And I'll tell you this, their pictures and videos that they release have been less revealing than previous years. So we're trying to glean what we can. So we're going to talk about the one piece of news that happened with cornerback Sean Murphy-Bunting. We're going to then discuss, the Darius Robinson, Marvin Harrison, their size, and with OTAs, the players who have and have not been there. Remembering, of course, that it is voluntary work still. That said, the most shocking and surprising news that came a couple of weeks ago was that of Sean Murphy-Bunting. They signed him to a 3-year contract last offseason. Kind of an up and down year. Some fans are really down on Sean Murphy-Bunting. He struggled a little bit earlier in the season, but was one of their more consistent performers, had a pretty decent season. He suffered an injury. The news came first that he was placed on the non-football injury list that would end his season, making him and that the Cardinals, with the non-football injury, are not obligated to pay him his contract, well, at least this year's salary. It was later revealed, Jonathan Gannon last week when he spoke to the media, said it was that he needed surgery, and then it was revealed he had a knee injury. We don't know the details yet. I'm sure that'll come out at some point. He suffered an off-season knee injury of some sort and needed surgery, and so they put him on FI, and he's done for the year. I will say this, while as surprising as it was, remember they drafted 2 more cornerbacks, and they had Asante Samuel in for a visit. With those moves and that visit, we're like, oh, things make more sense now, don't they?
Yeah, it's almost like they knew back in March, allegedly.
Yeah, well, honestly, and that's like, remember with DeAndre Hopkins, they went and traded from Hollywood Brown. We're like, okay, why? And then suspension. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like they knew it was coming. They, did the best they can to minimize the impact it was going to have. And to make sure that they were prepared. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Is that you want to see that this franchise and this regime is prepared for things like that. And they don't make moves out of left field, or they don't make panic moves like we saw with the Hollywood Brown trade, right? Like, and so to see that, yeah, hey, we knew this was coming, and obviously they never said that, but you can put 2 and 2 together, and the reality became that they are prepared from a talent standpoint. The one thing that's missing would be that veteran presence, but like you said, they've even brought in a guy like Asante Samuel Jr., who they're like, hey, we'll get back in touch when you're healthy, right? Like when you're ready to go, and we'll go from there. And so, so far it seems like things are really only negative for Sean Murphy-Bunting. And I will say this, like, you're right. There are a lot of people that are not or were not impressed with Murphy-Bunting. And he did struggle early in the season. But the reality was he had a solid end of the season. The entire secondary began to play at a higher level. It was the secondary wasn't completely abysmal, and it was the running or the run defense more than anything that was the struggle. And so running it back with these guys getting better, and then a potential upgrade in Will Johnson made sense. And it's just unfortunate timing, and you do feel bad, and something we've always kind of talked about with the Cardinals, because this has happened 3 or 4 different times while we've done this podcast, is that the Cardinals don't ever seem to be very vindictive in these circumstances, right? Like they seem to not usually, and I won't say never, because never say never, but they usually don't go after things that are already paid out or things like that to recoup money. They're very much like, we have seen them toll salary, basically meaning they don't pay it for that year, and then the Cardinals still control them for X amount of years. So in Sean Murphy-Bunting case, if they told his contract, they would still own his rights for 2 additional years. So like you said, he signed a 3-year deal. He's played 1 year. If they toll the contract, they don't pay 2025, and then they still have him under contract for 26 and 27. Again, we don't know if they're going to do that. At this point, they could basically release him and not incur any penalty from what they still owe him. And then again, they could, and again, they haven't done this in the past, but they could even go after his signing bonus, because he was unable to fulfill portions of his contract. And there's some like language out there that's really, really interesting, because there are things, and we don't have the actual report of what happened. There's been speculation that he blew an ACL playing basketball. We can't, unless Sean Murphy-Bunting comes out and says it, we know the team's not going to leak that information. But there are some things out there in these contracts that, these guys are not allowed to do. And so it would be interesting to see if they, what in Murphy-Bunting's contract, or in most Cardinals contracts, are considered activities that are illegal in their contract. Some of it's stupid stuff, like, right, they can't go snow skiing, water skiing, things like that.
Yeah, and those have been pretty standard in contracts for a long time.
Right.
But didn't we sort of hear that, like, I'm sure they will not pay him his full salary. He was due $7.7 million, almost all guaranteed this year.
Yeah.
And they are not obligated to pay him any of it. I think they will opt to pay him some of it, maybe the league minimum, and rather than tolling the contract, they pay him some, because honestly, it would make more sense to pay him some, and because otherwise you go into next year and he has guaranteed money again, unless it voids the guarantees. Because if it is basketball, I don't think basketball is one of those things that.
Yeah, I mean, hell, they just were highlighting Mac Wilson's basketball charity event, right? Like,
right.
And so, yeah, so that's why I said there's some language and stuff in there, like, depending on what it is, like if he was, like I said, water skiing and blew the ACL, they can literally just go after anything they want, because it's against his contract.
It would void his guarantees. I'll maybe try to find it. I do have a copy of a contract. I had an agent give me a copy of a contract. There was something I was looking for, and I was surprised at some of the language that was in there. Those contract restructures, they don't have to ask the player. Like when they said they have the right to do it, and they just, and since you're not losing any money, you're just converting it into a bonus, whatever. And the player doesn't get any say into that. They just say, I know we're paying you now. There are some clauses about what they say about the team and their teammates and the coaches. They can have their guarantees voided if they say something that is deemed as against or I can't remember what the wording is for, but detrimental to the team.
Yeah,
they can have they can have their guarantees voided that way. But it's. But here's the interesting thing: when they drafted Will Johnson, and then they drafted Denzel Burke, so much that the Denzel Burke I'm not so worried about. But when they drafted Will Johnson, it immediately made that room crowded, and we talked about they were going to have to get rid of somebody, because Sean Murphy-Bunting was going to have a starting job likely. Then you've got the slot guy in Garrett Williams. Then you've got Star Thomas and Max Melton and Will Johnson. So you've got three guys vying for a spot. And as of a month ago, it was almost guaranteed that Star Thomas was either going to be traded or let go, probably, unless he would move back to like that fifth corner spot that Keitrell Clark held last year. But now you can essentially keep the same starting core, and Will Johnson has now a wide open door to be their cornerback one, because how they did it last year, they basically had a rotation. Like it was Sean Murphy-Bunting played the most. You have Williams in the slot, and then you had Star Thomas and Max Melton who did some rotating. Star Thomas played a lot, and Max Melton played about 50% of the snaps last year still, even in a fourth cornerback role. And so now there's going to be competition as to who that is. So at worst, Will Johnson is going to have the role that Max Melton had last year, where he's kind of the fourth cornerback. But because of the talent that he is, because of what the upside is for him, he really has a chance to be CB1 and have Thomas and Melton sort of rotate in the same way they did last year, which really solves the cornerback logjam problem that it looked like they were going to have. Because say what you want, like, people didn't love Sean Murphy-Bunting. He was a starting level cornerback. Star Thomas isn't anything, spectacular, but guess what? This coaching staff trusts Star Thomas and believes in the upsides that he has. And so that if there's one thing, it's kind of cool that this happened, is that, well, something needed to happen this offseason before they set the final roster and started playing. And that something happened. And they're in a position where they're okay. Now, do they have lots of experience? No, they don't have a lot of experience. And even still, because of Denzel Burke and Keitrell Clark and Elijah Jones and Darren Hall, they will still have fierce competition in that room. They just don't have anyone with more than 2 years experience, basically.
Right. And that's, what it's going to come down to is there's some different, there's just some different ways that this is going to happen now. And that makes it a little bit more fun to me, because the reality is, what you're getting in Sean Murphy-Bunting. His high end has been and is a solid cornerback 2 level guy. But you look at the other guys, right? And you look at things, or you look at the ability to get upgrades from that, and we don't know what some of these guys are. We saw some really good things from Max Melton last year, and obviously Garrett Williams is turning into one of the better corners in the NFL, especially playing from that slot position. But right now we have no idea, and that's what makes all of this so fun to watch, because you just don't know, and it just changes everything that's happening. And that's to me what makes all of this enjoyable, right? Like you look at these different players, and you look at the ability to find talent and see where it goes and where you can take the next step. And again, if Sean Murphy-Bunting's your corner 2, you're probably in a really good spot. If he's your corner 3, you're like, holy crap, this is a good secondary. And so now it's like, okay, what if you just don't even miss him, right? Then you're like, oh, this is a good secondary. And that, again, that's what makes this stuff, to me, fun.
Yeah. As a note, I did find that hazardous activity clause. So let me give you this list. These are the things that NFL players, I think this is standard across I bet this is standard across every NFL contract. A player will be in default by participating in these hazardous activities. And that including without limitation, skydiving, bungee jumping, hang gliding, parasailing, mountain climbing, auto racing, motorcycling, riding any off-road or all-terrain vehicle or jet ski as driver or passenger, scuba diving, surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, skiing, water skiing, martial arts, professional wrestling, boxing, rodeo events, hunting, use of firearms, fireworks, and explosives, and any matter activity similar to the foregoing. That's interesting is hunting and use of firearms for the hunters on the team. That's an interesting one. That's one of the things that they just have to be super careful about. So,
well, and I'm sure there are guys that typically.
I'm sure guys do that, but if they get hurt as a result, they'll be considered in default.
Right, and I'm sure there are guys that probably get some approvals, if you will, to be able to do things like that, right? They're like, hey, I'm going to go do this weekend. And they're like, we'd prefer you not, but we understand it. That's who you are. That's what you guys do. So we'll allow it to happen. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, you look at that, it's pretty standard, right? Like, don't do stupid. Like I tell my kids, just don't do stupid crap. Like, it's just like, it's funny because, again, going back to some youth football stuff, one of the things that we ask the kids, and even going into high school, it's like, hey, don't jump on trampolines. Just don't do it. Like 4 months, just don't jump on a trampoline, please. That's all we ask. Because the amount of times that, a kid breaks an arm, breaks a leg just from jumping on the trampoline is kind of staggering, and you don't even think about it. And then they're out for the season, and it's like, and then the other thing is too, right? You don't go, well, hey, Kyler Murray, you're not allowed to do this stuff. But, Clayton Tune, if you want to go wild, Clayton, whatever you want to do, right? Like you can't do that. So like you said, it's probably pretty like standard across the board type stuff. And then they go, we'll see what happens.
Coming up next on the Rise Receiver podcast, Best Our Cardinals Talk Alone. Let's talk about some of the bodies of our last year's rookies, second-year players. That's coming up next on the Recipe Red. We're back on the Rise of Series podcast, Best Our Cardinals Talk on the web. One or two, if you want to talk about it, big storylines of the offseason has been the physical transformation of defensive lineman Darius Robinson and receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., both getting attention for being notably more muscular. Although I will say this, my son Diego has been he's been downplaying this to people both privately and publicly, saying Marv's not that much bigger. Like some of the pictures that we've seen, he's like, that came after a pump. Like, you remember that picture of Jared Vildeer where he looked like basically the Hulk? That came literally moments after a workout. And as anyone knows who works out, if you get a good pump in and then you look physically, you look notably bigger muscularly. I'll agree that they do look more muscular. Do they look ridiculously more so than last season? I don't know. But there's like, these are players coming into their first NFL season where they're having now their first full NFL offseason workout using a pro regiment. That's what should happen, I would imagine.
Right, and that's how you would expect them to, and to see the changing of their bodies come in, because like you said, they're they're becoming more physically fit. They're in the program, they're in the workout program, they're in the meal program. Like, all of that stuff makes a difference, and I think people don't realize just how much that makes a difference for these guys, even athletes. Something that we talk about constantly is just that the change, even for elite level athletes and guys that take care of themselves, just in the regimen alone of, like, hey, this way you eat daily, this is how you lift daily, like this is how you train daily, to becoming what they are. It's just such a difference. And like you said, kind of standard operation. I think it's just nice that you're seeing it from Arizona Cardinals and players that you're hoping are high level contributors for this franchise.
Well, and then the other thing is that it is that very age where you start, like, Darius is going to turn 24 in September. Marv is going to turn 23 in August. I'm 48 years old. When from age 21 to 25, was not a big heavy workout guy. I've worked out some, and I'm definitely not, but there was a notable change. There was a transformation in my body as I went from young person, like teenage young adult body, to my grown man body, even before I filled out and got, my old man strength. That's completely normal at that age. Now, for Robinson, I don't think it's going to be significantly different, because I think he was already at that point, because he was quite the physique entering his rookie season. And, his size and his speed and his build and strength was already built for the defensive line. I think there is one thing. I think if there's going to be anything different about Harrison, if he is notably stronger, the muscular part, I don't care so much about how he looks as if he's playing stronger, as we felt that he sometimes lost contested balls in the pros, that things that he was better at in college. If he can play a tick or two stronger, and if that strength work that he did in this offseason contributes to that, I think that's fantastic. I think it'll be most notable in the way he attacks the ball, or in the way he comes down with passes, perhaps coming out of his break, the physicality at the line of scrimmage. I don't think it'll be significantly different for Robinson, because I think he was already kind of there.
Right, and the reality with Robinson is just mostly that we want to see him on the field, right?
Yes.
And then we can make a decision from that. And then, does he need to get stronger? Does he need to get, faster? What does he need to do? Like you said with Marv, there was obvious things that he needed to do to continue to get better. But we'll see what happens and how that goes. And if part of it is getting bigger and stronger, that's something that's easy in the offseason to take care of, and it seems like he is.
Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk. Let's move to the final segment. We're going to talk about the players who have been absent, who have not been absent, but basically the ones who we haven't seen on the field yet. What does it mean? How concerned are we? That's coming up next on Rise of Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the web, talking about OTAs and the Arizona Cardinals. The only thing that we can talk about at this time of year, reporters are allowed for the 2 weeks of OTAs to see the first 20 minutes of practice once a week. So they had 3 practices last week, 3 practices this week. Reporters were there on the first day last week, which is Wednesday, coming off the Memorial Day weekend. And then today, Tuesday, was the first day of OTAs this week that they had access to. And the next week will be minicamp. And reporters, and under the current rules the Cardinals have, they may observe and report on what they see for the first 20 minutes of practice. And that includes noting who is present and who is not present and who is off working to the side. And then after that, while they see things, they may not report on it. So if there's an injury that happens, who are the rotations? And that is the one thing that's changed. In previous years, between me and Howard, at the times we've been at practice during OTAs, the one thing I wouldn't tell you, I wouldn't be able to tell you, hey, this guy is running first team, but I could say this player, okay, like when Elijah Wilkinson, I didn't get to many of the, because I was traveling a couple of years ago, I didn't get to see it, but when I was told that when they signed Elijah Wilkinson that he was running most of the first team reps, oh, watch this guy. And so there's where they play in the rotation in practice. I can sort of say in my speculative type articles, keep an eye on so-and-so for in the mix for the starting job or for a backup job. I can't say why because they're running for the first team, but that's when we knew at the beginning, well, like when they signed Evan Brown last year, okay, he was going to be their starter because from everything that we heard and everything that we saw online, he was taking first team snaps. Now, I don't have that insight and haven't been able to glean much from the photos and videos, especially with the absences that we've seen. And with that, the one thing we can talk about, who's been there and who hasn't been there. And so I want to go down the list of players who have been absent last week and who are absent this week. So here are the names of players who have missed parts of OTAs. A reminder, this is voluntary. They are not required to be there. And so here we go. This week, on Tuesday, B.J. Ojulari, Josh Sweat, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Bilal Nichols, Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Justin Jones were not present, and Budda Baker was seen working to the side. Last week, Kelvin Beachum wasn't there, Jonah Williams wasn't there, Yelda Froholt wasn't there, and Walter Nolan, their first-round pick, was working on the side. Let's go with the kind of go down the list. If we're looking at B.J. Ojulari, how concerned are you?
Do you think he's healthy? Like, I'm genuinely asking. I have no idea. Because that's an interesting one, because you think that guy would want to be at camp as much as possible, but there's also the reality of that, like, they brought in a bunch of guys. Is he feeling, like his chance to succeed's out? Those are all fair questions to have about a situation like Ojulari's. But the biggest question I honestly would have is he healthy enough to participate yet?
And it could simply be that they're slow rolling him, like because he's in his third year.
He should know the system, yeah.
And so they might be just. And let's be honest, there were 2 practices last week that we didn't see, and I don't remember anyone saying that Ojulari was not out there last week. Teo Mackey from AZ Central Sports included him today and noted who was a new one. When I wrote the article last week and I was going through the tweets of that, I don't remember anyone saying that Ojulari was out. So maybe he has been practicing and just did it today as part of his, off day on day so that they have him ready for training camp. Josh Sweat for me is the most there for me. There are 2 players that I find interesting so far. But Josh Sweat is one. He wasn't present last week. He wasn't present today. One of 2 things. Maybe he's just not there because he doesn't have to be. But he has a $100,000 workout bonus, which means he needs to be at, it depends on the percentage. The highest percentage that a team could require is like 84%. And I know, based on what we heard from Zaven Collins today, that Sweat's been in the building. They've had conversations. He's been talking about things. I'd be concerned if that's an injury. So I hope it's not an injury. And my guess is he's been there for what he needs to be and just is opting not to do on the field work.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think that happens more than we like or know, if that makes sense. And so people get a little frustrated with things like that, but it's like, what are you going to do about it? I am with you though. I'm kind of interested why he's not out there as of now, and what the reasoning, if there is some, that he's not, involved.
Akeem Davis-Gaither was present and on the field last week, sat out, was not present this week. I'm not terribly concerned about it. Again, voluntary work. He's been in the league for 5 years already, but you always wonder, is he hurt? And if he is hurt, guess what? The door just swung wide open for rookie Cody Simon.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one again, because why are these free agents not here? That, rookies and free agents are where you, and I get their vets and stuff like that. And we'll talk about one shortly that I'm not concerned about because, quite frankly, I don't even know. I don't even know if he needs to be at anything. But, why is a guy that probably is going to get the best chance of his career to start not around and not involved?
And it could be a number of reasons. Maybe he's been at everything and he just had something going on today. I don't worry too much about it.
Summer vacation for them too, right?
Yeah. Mini camp next week. So everyone's got to be there. So if they're either on the side doing work or not out there, then there's going to be a little bit of concern, because one thing we know is Jonathan Gann is not going to reveal much in terms of injuries. He does not required to and really doesn't like to. Bilal Nichols, I don't remember him being mentioned as missing last week. Teo Mackey, again, didn't mention that he was a return guy. So I thought Nichols was on the field last week. He was not on the field today. I'm not terribly concerned, but if he's missed both days, that tells me, it's probably health related. He's coming off that neck injury that ended his season. But if he was on the field last week and he's not there this week, to me, that just says he took a day off.
Yeah, not uncommon in these situations.
Calais Campbell hasn't been on either of them. He's 39 years old. Why is he going to be and we saw on social media, he had an incredibly busy May. He had there was a friend, there was a marriage in his family. There were 3 graduations. There was birthdays. He's 39 years old. He's a stud. And he doesn't have a workout bonus in his contract. So I wouldn't expect him to be there until minicamp.
Yeah, exactly.
The next guy, interesting, is Dalvin Tomlinson, one of the newcomers, because he's a free agent. He's important. He has a $50,000 workout bonus, and he hasn't been on the field. He hasn't been present for either of the 2 weeks or the 2 days that that reporters were able. So, again, at his age, he's reaching age 30. I think is he age 30 now?
Yeah.
Maybe he's just opting out of the on-field work, but I haven't seen photos of him either. And so I'm assuming with the workout bonus that he has been part of the offseason program, or he's made enough money. He's like, I don't need the $50,000. But also not a major concern, just as long as he's not hurt.
Correct.
Justin Jones, present last week, not present today. The fact that he was on the field last week is good enough news for me after he had the torn triceps last year. He's another grizzled veteran, and so we're used to that. Veterans missing OTAs, not a big deal unless there's an injury.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is that you look at the fact that Tomlinson, as long as he's there for what you mentioned being the mini camp, that's what's really important for those guys.
Yep. And then there were 4 guys that returned but were either out or missed or on the side. And 3 were offensive linemen. Last week, Kelvin Beachum was gone, Jonah Williams was gone, center Yelda Frohold was gone, and first round pick Walter Nolan defensive lineman was working on the side with trainers. All three offensive linemen, though, were present this week, which, well, I wasn't like last week with Froholt. That was the one perhaps red flag, right? When we talked about it in our group text, like, okay, Froholt's out. Is he hurt? Because he signed an extension last year. It's not like there was going to be a contract issue. We were just worried, was he hurt? I saw photos of him during phase 2. He was on the field doing, like, not just on the field. He was snapping the ball. And the fact that he was there today, and I guess what's important to remember, the first week of OTAs, the first day of OTAs came on the Wednesday after Memorial Day.
Yeah.
So might have simply been, I'm taking an extra day for whatever reason. But he was back on the field. Beecham was back. And Beecham, I was not concerned. I was surprised that he was even there for this one because he's in his late 30s. He has a family. And as a player rep he's been before, he's been vocal about players making sure that they take their time and understand that the part of the offseason is, in fact, voluntary. Now, there are pluses. Like, there are some guys we've seen years before where players will do their own workouts on their own. Working out with the team in the offensive program, in the offseason program, provides you protections against injury. If you get hurt while at the facility, that is an at-work injury, and you are covered. If you're doing your own off-field workouts on your own, training on working weights on your own, and you drop the kettlebell on your foot and break it, that's a non-football injury and can put you in danger. And I think that's if Sean Murphy-Bunting tore his ACL playing basketball, he probably wouldn't be put on NFI if it weren't an injury that would have been, if he would have been healthy by training camp. That would have been fine. He would have been okay. He would have started on a PUP or on a 5, just that one. But Beecham being gone, I'm surprised he was there at all. Williams, Froholt is back, and the good news, Jonah Williams being back, that tells me something very good. Coming off that knee injury, I didn't like him not being there last week. Okay, veteran 1, 2, he's coming off the knee injury. The fact he's on the field today tells me he's on track because he's doing football activities, which means he should be good to go for training camp, which is important because that right tackle position was not addressed this offseason.
Correct. And that's one of the things we wondered aloud when it didn't happen, right? Like, oh, do they have a plan? Are they comfortable with where he's at?
And you're like, I guess the plan is Jonah Williams. So hopefully, we never knew what the severity of his knee was. And so apparently it wasn't a surgery type thing, or it was a minor surgery because he was on the field. And then, of course, the interesting one last week was that Nolan was on the side, which usually means injury, but he was on the field today. But Gannon said today that it was neither health nor contract related, which is interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, that's always interesting when there's no real information given or found.
So maybe it was just a slow roll, or maybe he was just on the field. Maybe it's slightly I don't know. As long as he's healthy. The fact that Budda Baker was on the side today, that's also an interesting thing. But for me, I guess next week is the important part.
Right. We'll see. We'll see if anybody. I don't want to say important because that makes it sound bad, but like if anybody important is missing.
Yeah, it's like who's off to the side, who's hurt. I don't know. And the truth is, we might not see Calais Campbell on the field next week either, but we'll know he's in the building at least, and that's kind of the important thing, I suppose. And other than that, I mean, there's not much to glean from this. I pulled from one of the articles that I wrote over in Cards Wire. I looked over videos and photos that the Cardinals released on social media and on their team site, just to see if I could glean anything about the rotations. What I did see is that John Gaines and Sincere Haynesworth were getting reps at center. Nick Leverett was getting left guards. Paris Johnson's been out. He's been working on everything. So every photo that had an offensive lineman seemed to have Paris Johnson. So there's no issues there. Isaiah Adams was getting work both at left guard and right guard. So yeah, I don't know. And with guys like Evan Brown, who's a veteran, and Jonah Williams, a veteran, I haven't been able to glean much else than that. Other than I did see one photo of the secondary where. And it was clearly the starters because it was Kyler throwing to Trey McBride. That it wasn't Will Johnson with the first team. It was the trio of Melton, Thomas, and Garrett Williams. What that says is that they don't have Johnson locked into a stat. Like it doesn't how Paris was and Marv were. They were okay. You are starter. They were immediately getting all the first team reps. That doesn't appear to be the case right now with Johnson, at least in OTAs.
Correct, and that's kind of a good thing at this point, right?
Yeah, and it just says that they like Max, they like Thomas, and honestly, Mac Milton needs to be good. Like that's what he was drafted to be. Like he's essentially, like if you look at Max Milton and Will Johnson, where they were drafted means they're the same player in terms of talent, right? They're both the same type of prospect. And Melton was a CB4 last year, so it shouldn't be a surprise if Johnson is a CB4 this year, which, he has the potential to be much better than that, but I think that's how they'll work him in. Like their first round pick and like Darius, the same thing. Walter Nolan, I think, is getting the same thing, but because they have so many guys in that defensive line room, you don't need to throw him in and get him all the first team reps. You can allow him to learn, which is it's kind of different because with Paris and Marv, there was no question.
Right. And, I don't think that's unexpected as you get better.
Yep. Anything else of note that you've been able to, because for me, OTAs have been very this is a time of year. This is like when it comes to the content in our sites, list rankings,
listicles time,
lists and rankings, and aggregation of other lists and rankings. So whether it's something we are ranking, or we are aggregating about somebody else's rank or list, that's what we're gonna be. That's what you're gonna see, and that's in terms of news, I think. Our shows, we might have a show about maybe late next week. I think we should probably talk maybe unless there's some news, we'll probably push towards late next week after mini camps happened. Then we'll get into our division rankings show, and then I'll start on the opponent preview shows. So we'll still have content here over the next couple of months before training camp starts. Now, the team hasn't announced it, but we do know, based on league rules, training camp will begin they will report on July 25th, and that first public practice or that first practice will be on July 26th. And so keep an eye on that. The announcement for training camp will be forthcoming here. It'll happen this month. But that's basically it. We'll talk to you guys. You'll hear us again and probably the end of next week. And then after that, we'll go from there. It's the off season. We'll try and give you as much content as we can. I'll probably record a solo show later this week and finally get on here and tell you about how I am not at the Cardinals facility. I don't like that. I'm rarely tried to make anything where I am the story. Well, this is a story that involves Cardinals and the podcast. So with that, Seth, anything else of note that you want to get recorded and off in the internet world for our listeners to hear?
No, we're just excited to see how this offseason goes because it feels like it's trending towards what playoff teams do. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that.
And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise of Sierra podcast. Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. We'll be back again soon. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we will be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, rise up, see red.